This is the introduction to Linux, and I'll be talking about what Linux is, why you should use it, and what are shells. These are the really basic things that you need to know to give context for the rest of this lecture. So most of the commands that you learn in this course are sort of agnostic to whichever Linux or Unix-like system that you use. For instance, if you're using a Mac OS, that's a Unix-like operating system. So the majority of the commands that you learn here will also work on that. Linux is a family of Unix-like operating systems based on the Linux kernel, which was an operating system first released way back in 1991 by Linus Torvalds. So if you're not sure what an operating system kernel is, that's the software that sits underneath all of the other software on a computer. It manages the computer's hardware and handles the connections between your software and the hardware. Linux is typically packaged as a Linux distribution or distro. This includes a kernel and supporting system software and libraries. And a lot of these are provided by the GNU project, which stands for, well, I know the first letter is GNOME, but I forget the other two. I think it's GNU Unix project. Anyway, typically on a Linux machine, a windowing system of some sort like X11 or Wayland interfaces directly with the underlying operating systems and libraries to support the graphical hardware, pointing devices, keyboards, and other attached hardware. The window manager generally runs on top of this windowing system. If you've never used Linux before, you might be a little bit daunted by all of the available Linux distributions like Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, Gentoo. Most of these are free and open source, but there are also a few commercial distributions like Red Hat Enterprise and SUSE. I can personally attest that Red Hat is quite good, but so is its open source alternative, which is Rocky, which is what the Cosmos system that I work at uses. Desktop Linux distributions typically include a desktop environment like GNOME, Mate, KDE Plasma, XFCE, Unity, and a lot of others. So most of what the user sees is provided by one of these window managers and the applications written using a widget toolkit. Okay, so now let's talk about shells. The shell is the interface between your keyboard and the operating system. It takes commands that the user inputs by typing, sends it directly to the operating system, and then performs the actions requested. The shell we use today is one of several varieties, each of which has somewhat different properties and syntax. There's the Bourne shell, the original one, the new Bourne Again shell, Bash. This is the one we'll be using today. There's also the C shell, the 10x C shell, TCSH. That's the first one I learned. The Corn shell, the Z shell, lots of others. But most of them end in SH. So if you see a 3 or 4 letter code word that ends with SH, it's probably a shell. Most centers have Bash as default. Certainly the computing centers in Sweden. And it's also a pretty good one for scripting. Most of the commands that we'll be teaching today are simple enough that it doesn't actually matter that much which one of these shells that you're using, but there are a few where it's relevant. So we'll be sticking with Bash because that's the most popular one. So why do people use Linux? First of all, it's been around for a really long time. It's almost 60 years old at this point. Well, it's 55. It's still in use because it's really powerful and it's open source. You can automate repetitive tasks with scripts. You can do complex tasks with just a few keystrokes. Most HPC centers and supercomputers run some flavor of Linux. And also, if you use an Android phone, that's also Linux. That's the operating system on your phone. Linux is stable and reliable. It's customizable. It's lightweight. No adware or bloatware attached. Runs on any hardware. So it's the one thing. It's the operating system that you pretty much have to use if you have to run like one software package that only runs on a Mac and one software package that only runs on a PC. If you run them on Linux, maybe not 100% of it will work, but 95% of it will work for both of those applications, for both types. It has a strong support community, specifically because it's open source and free, and it relies on community developers. So people want to share the knowledge, and it has a lot of applications. Linux is only used on about 3% of desktops, but that is growing. And also the vast majority of web servers, like 96+%, and most mobile devices, like I said, Android included, and pretty much all supercomputers in the top 500 list. All of these run Linux. So it's a good idea to be proficient in Linux, particularly if you're going to be using HPC clusters to do your research. There's also a lot more information on Linux on Wikipedia, and you can follow some of these extra guides and cheat sheets if you want to know a little bit more information. And with that, I will turn it back over